One of the most powerful ways that transport systems create a unique visual identity is through typography, which makes sense considering just how much text features across transport wayfinding signage, maps, and vehicles. Some of the most iconic transport systems in the world accordingly use some of the most iconic typography, which plays a vital role in helping passengers navigate these complex networks. Bearing all this in mind, in the 1970s, when the bosses at the Tyne and Wear Passenger Transport Executive were planning the UK's pioneering modern light rail rapid transit system, they realised that the new Tyne and Wear Metro would need its own iconic typeface. This is the story of that typeface. If you've ever travelled anywhere within Britain, you will have seen the work of the legendary graphic design partnership between Jock Kinnear and Margaret Calvert. In 1957, Calvert, a South African-born graphic designer freshly graduated from the Chelsea School of Art in London, was hired by her ex-tutor Kinnear to work with him on a government project intended to overhaul the nation's road signs and make them clearer and more consistent. Calvert went on to design the ubiquitous symbols and pictograms with which every road user is now deeply familiar, as well as the ultra-legible typeface named Transport, which became the standard font for all road signs both in the UK and in many other countries across the world to this day. The working partnership between Calvert and Kinnear also gave us Rail Alphabet, which became the standard typeface across the British rail network from 1965, and even survived through the privatisation of the railways in the 90s in many places. From the roads to the railways and even various airports, Calvert and Kinnear had quickly established themselves as design royalty when it came to transport in Britain. In the early 1970s, Calvert and Kinnear won a commission to develop a distinct visual identity for Quentin-en-Yvelines, a French new town and agglomeration planned to be built near Versailles. Margaret designed a stylized SQ logo for the town, which Kinnear adapted into a three-dimensional extruded form. But most crucially, she also created a bespoke typeface to represent Saint-Quentin. This was a slab serif type, giving the letterforms a solid, almost architectural quality, while still retaining a more playful character in the pleasing curves and often surprising placements of the serifs. However, the French authorities weren't pleased with Calvert and Kinnear's proposal and rejected the designs, describing them as too English. So the unnamed typeface went unused. But one town's design loss would soon turn out to be another city's gain. And so we arrive on Tyneside in the 70s, and the planning of the Tyne and Wear Metro. When the passenger executive considered creating the design identity of their new system, they knew they wanted a signature typeface that would be just as fundamental as the Johnston font is for London. Naturally, they thought of Margaret Calvert, who just so happened to have the perfect typeface in her back pocket. The typeface's solidity and quirkiness was considered a perfect representation of the city of Newcastle and its surrounding region, and was so striking that Calvert and the team soon decided to feature the typography at the very core of the design system, instead of the very kind of visual pictograms that had made Calvert's name in the first place. Following in the great tradition of M Metro logos, Calvert's slabby M was set in black on a yellow square, and thus became the system's identifier, featuring first on cubic totems at metro stations and soon on the trains themselves. Later tweaks led to the word Metro being included on a black bar below, which leaves us with the instantly recognisable logo used to this day. Yellow was undeniably the Metro's colour, and most of the system's directional signage was created in the same vein. But certainly the most distinctive application of Calvert's typeface came in the new purpose-built underground stations, where the station name was set full height at platforms on vitreous enamel panels in bright red, blue or green, or black in the case of St James, ensuring that no passenger would ever be able to miss their stop. After the Metro first opened in 1980, the signature typeface was prepared for wider commercial release by the Monotype company, who chose to release it under the name Calvert, after its creator. More than 20 years after the Tyne and Wear Metro first opened, the system finally reached Wearside in 2002, when the extension to South Hilton opened. Being the first major addition to the Metro map since the early 90s, the new line to Sunderland was given its own unique twist on the visual identity, making use of a cool pastel colour palette in the design of its new stations, although still prominently featuring the now classic Calvert typeface to maintain consistency. But as the 2000s marched on, and the passenger authority, now named Nexus, was considering refurbishing a number of Metro stations, they came to believe that perhaps the gaudy colours were growing a little bit dated. The trains themselves even now wore divisive liveries that just screamed 90s aesthetics. So, local agency Gardiner Richardson were drafted in to rethink the design identity. They knew from the off that the typeface's prominence needed to be enshrined in the visual language, so they made it their mission to enhance its role in the identity of the Metro. They pared the new colour scheme right back to a simple palette of black, white and Metro yellow. The iconic full-height station names remained after renovations to Haymarket and Central Station, but now in a much more modern style made up of stylish black stripes. Calvert finally became the standard font on all signage and updated displays, even being applied across the system map for the first time. Nexus also adapted the Metro logo to represent a cohesive visual shorthand for other forms of transport in the region as well, giving at least the impression of proper integration in the absence of the real thing. More recently, the Transport Policy Group representing the North East-wide local government authority took on the name Transport North East, and you might be able to guess which typeface they chose for their logo. What all this demonstrates is that the Metro planners got their wish, a unique, iconic typeface created by a legendary graphic designer which quickly cemented itself as the essential signifier of transport across the Northeast. Calvert has become a profoundly familiar sight to the residents of Tyne and Wear, and we are so lucky to have it. Thank you to Saint-Quentin for turning it down, but mostly, of course, thank you to Margaret for the gift of this special work of typographic genius.